The evidential argument from evil is considered one of the strongest arguments for atheism. One way this argument might be formulated is as follows. Premise 1. If an all-powerful, morally perfect God exists, then gratuitous evil does not exist. Premise 2. Gratuitous evil exists. Conclusion. An all-powerful, morally perfect God does not exist. In this video, I argue that there is a potential serious skeptical problem for proponents of this argument against traditional theism. First, we should pay attention to the fact that, strictly speaking, the conclusion of this argument as it is constructed does not technically describe atheism. Atheism is just one of a few possible entailments of the existence of gratuitous evil. It could be the case that God does not exist. However, it could also be the case that God or some deity exists, but he is either not all-powerful or not morally perfect, or some combination of those two possibilities. This is typically enough for people to consider it an argument against traditional theism, but as we will see, the openness of the conclusion has implications for the proponent's beliefs about things like the past or the external world. The most well-known objection to the evidential argument from evil is known as skeptical theism. Skeptical theism basically argues that we are not in a position to infer from the fact that we do not know why certain evils take place in the world to the conclusion that there is no all things considered justification for allowing it to take place. This argument typically relies on the limitations of our own knowledge in comparison to God's knowledge, as well as the all-powerful nature of God to block the inference to the existence of gratuitous evil. The two most popular objections to skeptical theism are that it entails moral paralysis or that it entails global skepticism. The more concerning objection of the two is that it entails global skepticism. Philosophers like Stephen Law and others argue that since skeptical theism blocks a certain type of no-seum inference about there not being any justification for God to allow particular evils to exist, we no longer have grounds to use this type of inference to dismiss the possibility that God may deceive us about our basic beliefs about the world itself, even if he has a morally justifying reason for doing so. A more thorough response to this problem will be given in the future, but in this video I will argue that the evidential argument from evil could itself entail global skepticism. Let's revisit the form of the conclusion where the proponent of the evidential argument from evil aims to demonstrate that traditional theism is false under the assumption that gratuitous evil exists. A simplistic approach is to consider three possibilities: atheism, a limited God, or a morally corrupt God. This possibility of a morally corrupt God is where the skepticism concern comes in. Consider the probability that your cognitive faculties, i.e. your memories, your perceptions, your thoughts, your reasoning patterns, and other faculties of your mind are reliable. What is the probability of reliable cognitive faculties on each possible outcome? Let's think about the atheist case. In this situation, it would be atheism in conjunction with the existence of gratuitous evil. So this would not include atheistic worldviews under which evil is a mere illusion. Rather, it will be a version of atheism which affirms the existence of pointless suffering and thereby potentially lowering the probability that we have reliable cognitive faculties. In my opinion, something like the evolutionary argument against naturalism would be successful in demonstrating that the probability of reliable cognitive faculties on that view is very low. But we can assume for a moment that that isn't the case. I'd like to suggest that even if the probability of having reliable cognitive faculties isn't that low, given the conjunction of atheism and gratuitous evil, the overall probability of having reliable cognitive faculties, given the full range of possibilities available in the conclusion of the evidential argument, is low. Let's consider the case where a deity exists, but is not all-powerful, and is therefore unable to prevent gratuitous evils from taking place. The range of possibilities in this case is too broad to say just how finite this being's power. There are many possible situations which are available. It is also compatible with varying degrees of moral corruption. To me, on this view, the probability of reliable cognitive faculties is just unknowable to us. But let's consider the cases under which a morally corrupt God exists. Within this set of possible worlds, the case can be made that the potential for divine deception has almost no bounds. There are limitless possible worlds where your most basic beliefs are false. Included in this range of possibilities is the scenario of an all-powerful, morally corrupt God who is a maximal deceiver, who creates beings with radically false or incoherent experiences for no morally justifying reason at all. we can see that on at least one of these two theistic alternatives, we're vulnerable to serious defeat of the reliability of our cognitive faculties. And these two views are an integral part of the conclusion of the evidential argument from evil. They are perfectly compatible with the existence of gratuitous evil, and therefore would need some independent reason for being dismissed. In other words, it is not fair to pluck the atheistic scenario from among the full range of available possible worlds and ignore the implications of accepting the conclusion of the evidential argument from evil. So now we consider the overall probability of reliable cognitive faculties given the total range of possibilities entailed by the evidential argument. And absent some reason to reject the theistic alternatives, the probability seems very low. This is true even assuming there is some way to escape the force of the evolutionary argument against naturalism applied to the atheistic scenario. We might therefore construct an argument as follows. Premise 1. If gratuitous evil exists, then an all-powerful, morally perfect God does not exist. Premise 2. If an all-powerful, morally perfect God does not exist, then the probability of having reliable cognitive faculties is low. Premise 3. Gratuitous evil exists. Conclusion 1. An all-powerful, morally perfect God does not exist. Conclusion 2. The probability of having reliable cognitive faculties is low. In other words, we need to internalize the fact that included in the conclusion of the evidential argument is the real possibility of this evil God scenario, or a maximally deceiving God scenario, which threatens to undermine our beliefs. Without some reason to reject the theistic positions compatible with gratuitous evil, it is the proponent of the evidential argument from evil who is found unable to escape the concern of divine deception. Although in this case, the divine deception could be at the hands of an evil God without any morally justifying reasons for allowing it. So in conclusion, the evidential argument from evil is shown to raise skeptical concerns of its own and may be considered rationally unacceptable. My goal here is to suggest that proponents of the evolutionary argument from evil should consider their own susceptibility to global skepticism when relying on this argument as a justification for atheism. Also, proponents of this argument who are atheists should take note that additional reasons are needed for settling on atheism over the theistic alternatives which are also compatible with gratuitous evil, if this is to be considered a definitive argument for atheism. Thanks for watching.